Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast is brought to you by Compassion International. They're the child development organization that works, releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. They were founded in 1952, and they partner with more than 7,000 churches in 25 countries to serve over 2 million babies, children, and young adults. They're doing great work releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. For more information how you can partner and become a sponsor for a child with Compassion, go to their website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Over 66 years sharing Jesus with every single child. That's what it's about. Check it out, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and sponsor a child today. On today's show, very excited to bring to you New York Times bestselling author, speaker, evangelist, and former college baseball player Jefferson Bethke is our guest here on the podcast. And Jefferson, if you know his video or his book, if you might recognize the name and think, okay, I know that. Where is that from? Well, he's the author of the book, Jesus Greater Than Religion, a New York Times bestseller. And he was also the creator of a video. This is where it really all started for him in 2012, creating a video on YouTube, the video called Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus. And as of late May, that video still was at 34 million views and counting. I've seen it shown in youth groups. I've seen it shown in churches. I've seen it shown at conferences. In his book, I got to tell you that Jesus Greater Than Religion book helped me a lot in my walk as I geared away from the sort of religious practice of going to church as a young Catholic boy to understanding about a personal relationship with Jesus and who Jesus was and why it was so important to follow him and not a tradition. So Jeff's books have helped me, and it's helped a lot of people. I've come in contact with many people, especially in the sports world, many athletes who've read this book and can't speak highly enough about what this book did for them in their journey to Jesus. So really excited to have Jefferson here on the podcast, talk about his baseball career. He played college baseball, grew up loving baseball in the Seattle Mariners, and then getting into a few different topics with him, including social media, including parenting, just lots of good stuff here from Jeff. So take a listen. Jefferson Bethke, New York Times bestselling author, evangelist, and speaker, joining us here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Jefferson, welcome to the podcast.
Jason, thanks so much for having me. This is fun.
Jeff, this is great. I'm so glad that we were able to do this. And we've known each other for a few years now. And I remember how we got connected through social media and then able to get you to come here where I still am in Bristol, Connecticut, and took you to the ESPN headquarters and spent a day there. And I remember when I introduced you to Tim Kurkjian, and your eyes went googly-eyed. It was like the biggest deal for you to meet Kurkjian, and it just really showed me, I think, as we dive into your journey here, how much you love baseball. Can you share a little bit about that love of baseball and where that came from?
Yeah, totally. Well, it was funny mentioning that because, like you said, we got lucky with the day I came and visited and stuff like that with, what was it, Sunday, what they call it, Sunday Night Countdown or something, where the football guys, so then Berman and some of these other guys, they're amazing, and it was fun to shake their hands. But yeah, being a baseball guy, when I saw Tim Kurkjian, he's like a legend to me, and just like I love that guy. So, and that was in passing, right? We were coming in that one door, he was coming out, and that was awesome.
That's it, yeah.
So yeah. Baseball, I mean, I don't even know it's kind of one of those things where I started so young, it just felt like it was just kind of like, the same way you learn to read or learn to walk or whatever as a kid. So I don't even know if I like cultivated a love for it as a kid. It was just like what I played as a kid that then turned into just like what I did and then what I did enjoy and then what I did love. But yeah, played baseball all the way from, I don't know, from before I have memory. So I guess I would have been like age 3-ish, 4-ish, probably, T-ball or before then. And then, yeah, played all the way through college, high school. So I guess 17 years, which is funny it's funny when you play college baseball and you kind of, and you don't go play professional.
Right.
It's interesting to kind of realize then how you kind of played and dedicated your life to a sport that really doesn't have any huge immediate measurable payoff once you're done. There is a dramatic kind of cutoff after college baseball where you just kind of feel like, oh, I just played that sport for 17 years and dedicated, 250 days a year to it, 3 hours a day, whatever. And it's kind of just done. Move on. It's just a weird kind of psychological thing a lot of people don't talk about,
Did you play like in a bunch of rec leagues or any old man baseball or softball leagues to kind of keep it going?
I might coming up here soon, but no, I never did. Once I was done playing in college, I just stopped and kind of moved on and got a career and started working and all that stuff. But yeah, I wish, looking back, I was a left-handed pitcher and a center fielder, right fielder on my college team. And then, and so, yeah, like I do miss being on the mound, man. Pitching I definitely miss pitching.
Tell me about your baseball memories as a kid. Do you have like that little league memory that you might tell, your grandkids someday that grandpa did this or accomplished that? Is there a game or a moment that sticks out for you in your baseball career?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that. No, I had a blast playing as a kid though. Grew up in Seattle, Washington. And so obsessed with Seattle Mariners and obsessed with that era of them, right? One of the best, one of the best teams in the history of the MLB that never actually won anything.
Yeah.
The mid 90s was my, golden era of me loving them. And that would have been, A-Rod, Griffey, Jay Buhner, Edgar Martinez, just some phenomenal, Hall of Famers and players. But that's mostly what I remember when I think of baseball as a kid, not like my own coach pitch team, but just like going to the Kingdom, going to Mariners games. We were so diehard, we'd go to we had season tickets to the AAA team.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So yeah, I loved, and I was that kid. That's actually the baseball memories I think of as not games, but I was that kid where we had season tickets to the AAA team, Tacoma Rainiers, about 30 minutes from Seattle. And that's, obviously where, if A-Rod's hurt, he comes and rehabs. Jay Buhner, there was a couple of Randy Johnson. And I was just that kid that had it down to a science of how to get a signed card, how to get a bat, how to get, these things that were really fun and autographs, and I would collect them. So yeah, so I actually ended up having this almost cache of just people's gloves and bats and cards and all that stuff over the years that I collected and then ended up selling on eBay when I was in my 20s in college when I needed money.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I sold one A-Rod card for I think $1,200 or something. And then, had a Jay Buhner signed bat, and it was all from just when they would come down to AAA. And isn't that crazy?
That is nuts. I mean, so you got to meet all of your heroes. A lot of people, for me, I grew up a Mets fan. Darryl Strawberry was my guy, but I think I went to 3 games. I lived 2 hours away from Shea Stadium, and gosh, I never even remotely came close to meeting or getting anywhere near Darryl Strawberry until I was at ESPN. So as a kid, that would have been the greatest thing. So just thinking for you, how awesome that must have been to get that close to Griffey and to Buhner and to the big unit.
Well, they're giants, right? They're giants when you're that age. And then what's cool is at a AAA stadium, it's so intimate and it's so small that they even engage you differently because they don't get overwhelmed by it, right? 45,000 people don't want to see them. There's 2,000 people. And then out of those 2,000, maybe 100 want to stay after and get an autograph or something, So it was so the intimacy of it was really, really cool. You could see them, where the locker room door is that you could stand outside of after to get their autograph or get it after the game. And so, yeah, it was really, really cool. And then it was really cool, AAA to see those players that not come down for rehab, but are so young. They're actually in AAA, and you've never really heard of them, but then they go up and become better later, So it was just cool. That was a lot of my actual baseball memories, is just kind of tracking the sport of baseball and the Mariners and all that stuff.
Jefferson Bethke is our guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. I think a lot of people know about your book, Jesus Greater Than Religion. Your video, obviously, it was 2012, and we'll talk about the video in a second and kind of how it came about. But before that, let's go back maybe 15 years from now. What's that, 2004? Where's life for you growing up in your teen years? Where's God for you? Or not life, but where's God for you in that life as you're growing up in high school, going into that college time when you were playing baseball?
Oh, too funny. You mentioned 2004. That would have been, because I just did the math, and that would have been my freshman year of high school, which was actually one of the more significant years in my life in kind of a bad trajectory. I would have considered that's when I started to kind of really just get hard-hearted, make some bad decisions. So yeah, my story is, I grew up with a single mom. She's awesome. She's amazing. Love her to death. She's just incredible. Worked hard to provide for us, but we still were on, government housing, food stamps, Section 8, moved around a lot, etc. And freshman year, baseball was kind of the thing kind of keeping me on the straight and narrow usually. But then freshman year, I just started to kind of, do the typical stuff that a fatherless child does, just kind of make dumb decisions, kind of stop caring about school, blah, 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 and to the point where I'm trying to even think the exact order of things. But basically it just turned to the point where it was just getting so bad. I was kind of like flunking out of high school just basically because and it was funny as I was ahead of grade. I skipped a grade because back in like elementary, I was, whatever those tests, if I was ahead and it would have been better and challenging to go ahead. So I was actually always young for my grade because I was ahead. Then I got to high school and kind of just, turned to a dud, basically just gave up. And, there's probably a lot of stuff there. So basically it wasn't in a good place with the Lord, even though I would have said I grew up kind of knowing the right things and we did go to church. And so I had kind of the knowledge of those things. And so that was when my mom, it was actually really cool. She, there was one baseball coach I had who gave me private lessons, who was a believer and just one of those solid like father figures, and presence in my life. And so when that started to happen in my freshman year, he was actually the coach of a high school team, not just private lessons, about 30 minutes away. And so my mom just made the decision to just basically pull me out and we just moved. We completely picked up our house and moved to that city so I could play baseball with him and basically be under him in more of like a daily way, because she was kind of seeing me going in a bad trajectory and seeing if that would kind of help me bring me back around. And it actually did. So it was that would have been that year when that happened, where I was kind of just making poor decisions and doing bad at school and kind of just, not respectful, as a teenager, stuff like that. And so then we would have moved, and that would have been, and I got plugged in with a lot better group of friends and then started playing baseball on that team. And he actually became a really solid kind of second father in my life. And so, that's when that would have happened, which is crazy.
So you had seeds planted about God and seeds planted about church, and even being around that coach that was a godly sort of influence on you. But if I was to ask you, high school Jefferson Bethke, Jeff, who was or what was your God in high school? What would you say?
Myself, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Self, girls, just like whatever felt good, whatever I wanted to do. Nothing that took any type of hard work or discipline, kind of just the typical undisciplined, lack of discipline, fatherless teenager, for lack of a better term. And so, so that actually, even though we moved and I was like, I got put in a better spot, at least in a functional way, where I started to get better grades again and was playing baseball and doing well functionally. But like in my own heart, my own mind, I wasn't walking with the Lord. And then that stuff started to just get kind of more hard-hearted all the way through high school. So the 4 years of high school were kind of just me not making the absolute best decisions, but still like more on paper doing okay, if that makes sense. I recovered and was, a good student, good baseball player. People look up to me, and I was doing fine. But it wouldn't have been until the freshman year of college that I actually would have said I had an encounter with the Lord because of some of the decisions I was making and stuff like that. And so, that's when that would have been the actual turnaround, which then, like you said, then one of the first people I went to was then my high school baseball coach, who was a believer and who had planted those seeds for 4 years. And it was really a huge lesson on just like how to love someone and be faithful to someone, knowing that, it's the Lord, it's on the Lord's timetable,
Yeah.
That was always such a lesson to me, is he did such a good job of that, of just being a faithful presence, not trying to, push me one way or the other really fast. And that was really huge.
Can you explain that encounter? Maybe take us into that encounter that you just kind of mentioned, that encounter with the Lord for the first time?
Yeah. So I go to college down in San Diego to play baseball. And like I said, was doing it was successful by the worldly standards. I was playing college baseball. I had good grades. It was a nice university. I was excited. And then a couple things kind of crumbled all at once that freshman year, where I think my first serious girlfriend broke up with me. I got put on academic probation because I actually started kind of making some really poor decisions again in college, getting into party and all that stuff. And then I got kicked off the baseball team because of that, that was the only reason I went to that school. So all three of those happened within like 2 weeks. And that kind of put me in a little bit of like an identity crisis of like, oh, wow, what am I doing here? What's the point? Why am I even at this school then if I'm not playing baseball, blah, blah, blah. Just kind of I say it kind of made me pull my head out of the sand. I feel like I realized that my head was in the sand, just kind of – a lot of us live more robotic than we think. Yeah. A lot of us live more hedonistic than we think, where we're just kind of – we don't realize that we're just driven by impulse, driven by what feels good, tastes good, smells good. And with, of course, some mitigation against that. And so, Yeah. And so that was kind of the first time where I think I just woke up and kind of just really, it was the first time I really looked at my whole life of like, what is the point? You know, those really big questions. Why am I here? Who is God? What's the point of this whole thing? And it was the first time I also realized that me in the driver's seat of my own life never ended well. You know, like that's what got me here. That's what got me to this place, was me thinking that I'm king and that I make my own decisions and that I am in control of my own life. And so, yeah, that would have been then kind of then all the seeds and all the people who supported me and, you know, from church and all that stuff, all those would have kind of came slowly flooding back to me my freshman year of college, where then that was kind of the first place I turned. I just went back to the scriptures. I went back to some of the stuff I thought I heard as a kid and kind of started investigating and being intrigued. And and it wasn't an overnight thing, but I would have said over a period of a couple months, I kind of just repented and believed. I kind of just looked. I got to this place where I was like loving the scriptures, loving Jesus, felt like I was drinking from a well of deep water. And then I kind of looked back and I was like, oh, I don't really make those choices anymore. I'm not really chasing that anymore. It was almost like a secret conversion of like, I never actually concentrated on that part. I just like concentrated on Jesus. Right. And then I looked back and I was like, oh, I guess I repented from that stuff, and I guess I believe in Jesus. Like, that's what it means to follow him, you know? I have a new heart, new desires now. So yeah, that would have been freshman year of college and in 2008, I guess.
Okay. So that's 11 years ago or so. And then it was just a few years after that you have this idea of making a video, because you were still in college, I believe, when you made the video, right?
Yeah, so that would have been my senior year in college, where I was, you know, walking with the Lord for 4 years now. I was trying to engage some students around me and host Bible studies and encourage people around me and other people who were kind of maybe walking the same path that I did. And and so one of the ways that I did that is I wrote a poem for my school's open mic, which was just like once a month, you know, people who sing or musicians or whatever can get up there. And I was just like, oh, this will be a kind of a cool opportunity to really kind of get people's attention. And I grew up in more of like an urban context, hip hop culture. And so I loved spoken word, and that was kind of popular then. Yeah. And so, yeah, I just wrote like a spoken word poem kind of about Jesus and some other things. And that was actually, it was specifically for like my friends and the students at the school, not for the internet or not whatever. And it went well, and it was really encouraging, and it was really cool. But then I just kind of graduated and moved on. And then 6 months after graduating, my buddy was like, hey, I'm home for the weekend. He was still in college, and he was like, I'm bored. He's like, let's make a video. That's what millennials do when you're bored, make a video. Yeah. It's like second nature to us, And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, well, I don't have anything to say or any topic. I was like, oh, but I wrote this poem thing. That'll be easy. We don't have to write anything new. Can do this. And so then boom, it was like accidental. We did it. And then the next day it had like 2 million views. So it was totally just like the most crazy, surreal, instant, weird moment of my life for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's and in many ways, it's a catalyst of where you are right now in a lot of ways. But I want to talk about 100%. that sort of instant fame that came. We talked to a lot of athletes on this podcast, and a lot of them, we ask about their platform and about that sudden moment when they get recognized, or when, suddenly somebody's asking them for their autograph. And so I wonder for you, it's a different type of fame, I guess, in the sense that it's a sort of internet fame, but suddenly you're getting attention and notoriety and calls from people and eventually books to write and things like that, all because of one video. What was that like, trying to navigate through that right after? I mean, you're still in college at this point. So what was that like, trying to navigate through that?
Yeah, it was weird. I guess when the video came out, I would have been, just 6 months removed from college. So still very young. I was 22. It was surreal. I think part of it was very whirlwind-like looking back. I'm just so glad that I think the Lord just kind of spared me and spared. I think the main thing I look back and I'm thankful for is that I had a really solid group of older godly men and mentors in my life who very much were able to protect and hedge me from that going off the rails, right? Stewarding it well, honoring it well, me not making stupid decisions, me being a good steward of the platform. And I think that kind of helped. Not kind of helped. I think that was actually the main reason it helped. And so, that was huge.
What about sort of with fame, right, and with notoriety and popularity comes the naysayers, and the backlash is always going to come from, whether it's religious people or others. What type of backlash did you receive, I guess, when this video came out? Did you receive any backlash? Because it's so popular and it's getting viewed by so many people, even still to this day. But was there backlash, and was there sort of that negative side of things that you had to deal with?
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of backlash, and there was a lot of kind of disagreement, but man, I'd have to think back on that. It was like 7 years ago now. But yeah, I think the cool part is I think it just really taught me a lot on being nuanced, and be careful with what you say, and contextualization, and honoring, and understanding the family of God and unity. And it gave me a lot to think about too on how I speak online. I think a lot of it, there was some really helpful critique that I think I took that I actually appreciated. But a lot of it was very I think people tend to dehumanize when they critique on the internet. They don't understand there's a real person there. They don't understand that's a real life. They don't understand that person. We don't give people the benefit of the doubt and say like, hey, what did you mean by that? They kind of just jump, And so, yeah, there was a lot of different things, but that was definitely what I learned for sure.
The video was called Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus. I was looking at May 21st as I wrote down some prep here. It had still almost 34 million views, which is just an amazing number to think about, and sort of mind-boggling that many people would watch a video. And that's YouTube for you. That's the power of sort of the technology and YouTube and where we are. Jeff, when that starts to take off and your platform starts to get bigger and bigger, and suddenly you start dreaming about making this a career, what was that process like for you? And was it, because what was your desire or dream or goal to have as a job before this new world that you live in now took shape?
Yeah, good question. So I was actually going to school. I was a political science major. And I was going to go get my teaching certificate, my master's in teaching, to kind of just teach like high school social studies and stuff. I'd always wanted to be like a teacher of sorts. And I feel like it's always funny how, the Lord kind of works that in different ways.
Yeah.
I always wanted to teach. I always wanted to walk people through big ideas. And I really loved that stuff, and loved, whiteboards basically, and big concepts and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that was the goal. And so I think I really kind of learned that in a weird way, this was where the Lord was putting me, but in a different way, right? With the internet, using YouTube and using podcasts and using books to unpack big ideas and to teach. But yeah, that was basically what happened. Is I kind of, when it went viral, started getting cool opportunities and had to know what to say no to, what to say yes to. And it was just a process of kind of asking, where does the Lord want us and what's he have for us? But it was just putting one foot in front of the other and seeing if it was viable. I think that was the cool part, is there wasn't a ton of risk because we didn't have kids yet. I was still young. Me and Alyssa weren't even married yet. Yeah. So there was an ability to kind of see, let's go jump into this, and I'll go say yes to when people want me to do this, this, and this, and see how it goes, because there wasn't a ton of risk yet,
Yeah, and one of the things you said yes to was your New York Times bestselling book, Jesus Greater Than Religion, piggybacking certainly off the video, and it just did so well. I love that book, and it's helped so many people, especially in the sports space, which is interesting and something I want to ask you about, because I can't tell you the amount of people now that I'm connected with in the sports space, especially with the ministry that we do, working with professional athletes. We're at conferences, and your book and your name comes up more times. I can't even tell you how many times your name in the book has come up. I wonder, obviously that's not something you maybe even thought was going to take place, but how this book has really affected people in the sports world. Have you seen that? Yeah. Have you started to get a lot of feedback from different people?
No, it's weird. I don't know. It's just, again, it's like the Lord's providence, right? But that book totally has, I don't know if it's just a little bit, because it's a little bit more accessible. It's a little bit more memoir-like, which people I think really like reading people's stories. And then two, I think sports people and culture really resonate with it, because that's my story and that's the language in the book. And it's the stuff I talk about in the book from my own story is the typical trappings of a sports culture. And so it's like very similar. So I totally understand and totally get it. But yeah, there's all the way from like some of my buddies on the Eagles who like have done it and gone through it as a study, as a team. My old buddies on the Seahawks. I've sent some books, I think, to some NBA guys, and it's always that book. It's funny. Like I have a handful of books, but it's funny how, that book tends to kind of be a really cool, the Lord's just kind of blessed it and been a cool resource for kind of I don't know, unifying, integrating people and believers on teams and encouraging each other. And it's really cool. It's weird, but it's cool.
Do you still see that today? Not with the book, but just in the idea of what the concept of the book and even that video was about, that it's really when you introduce people to Jesus versus a religion or versus rules and how to go to church, or maybe how certain people were raised growing up in the church, that it still penetrates. It's still the powerful, the sort of special anecdote, if you will, that gets to people, when they hear that name Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the difference. Is it's such a that book goes right to the heart of the matter. You know what I mean? Like, it's not beating around the bush. It's very much at the center of like, this is what's most important. Do you really know Jesus? Do you have a relationship with him? Do you understand what he's done and who he is and who he says you are? And I think because of that, because it's so core, such a central concept and idea that it just seems to kind of really get to that place for people.
You also have written a few other books. It's Not What You Think, and certainly a marriage book on relationships with your wife called Love That Lasts, which was really good. I'm just wondering now where you are, right? Because you're a dad of 3, which is kind of crazy to think about, and been married for a few years with Alyssa, and you're so public about your marriage and sort of some of the things that you've learned, and you do ministry together, which is a really cool thing, because for many years this was just you, and then now it's you and your wife, and you've been married for a while. Tell me about the dynamic of doing life together, but even doing ministry together and doing work together.
Yeah, it has its challenges for sure, but we actually really, really love it. That was actually a hope when everything kind of happened, that we would actually could integrate ourselves together more and more, because me and Alyssa feel a very similar call. She has such a gift to encourage women. She has such a gift of writing. She has such a gift to just kind of speak, and she doesn't care about the internet, which I think is also what makes her so amazing on the internet, is you can tell that when she is on the internet and when she's encouraging you and she's blessing you, she doesn't care. She's not trying to build a platform. She's not trying to be an influencer, kind of all those, terms everyone uses today. And I think that's what actually makes her really bleed through and cut through the noise, as people, it's just such a real dense, she comes across as so real and dense and full, right? Not like flimsy or cheap or like a lot of some of the internet stuff is. And so we love working together. It's a blast. I think the cool part is I think it's actually only accelerated our marriage, in the sense of like, when you work together, you're just together more. You have to learn boundaries better, from personal to work to conversations to date nights to everything. So, in my opinion, all that does is accelerate your growth, because you're just having the same conversations and same growth patterns that everyone's having. You're just having them a lot faster because you're around each other more. You're having more time with each other, and you're having the conversations in a quicker way, Yeah,
absolutely. You're one of the things you're still very active on, and you talked about it, with social media, especially Instagram. I was reading recently, you share a lot from your heart and a lot of sort of longer posts, which I really like that you do that. And you wrote one about recently called Breaking the Script. And I think there's a lot of people, even in the sports world, a lot of coaches that listen to this podcast, who feel trapped and caught up in routine. As coaches, they're caught up in getting up and going through the same thing over and over again. And you were really talking about this from a dad perspective, but can you speak into that a little bit about why that breaking the script mold was something that you really have seen value on in your life?
Totally. Yeah, a couple things there. And I do this fun series called Jeff's Dad Thoughts, where that's probably the main focus of our kind of work right now, is this venture called Family Teams. And we talk about building multi-generational family teams on mission. And it's actually really cool because it resonates a ton with the sports analogy. We talk about being a father coach. We talk about being team players and what that means, and having a mission, winning the championship, having, practice and games, and it's really, and using that language for a family is really, really strong and helpful. But so I do this series called Jeff's Dad Thoughts, and that was one of the ones where I posted this longer kind of thing to think about for people. The breaking the script concept, there's a couple things there. One book people can go read that actually kind of details it with pretty cool science and psychology and just kind of like some data is what's it called? Power of Moments, I believe, by the Heath brothers. I think that's 2 brothers. Power of Moments, I think. And there's some stuff in there that's really, really brilliant. But essentially the concept is live on 2 poles, and that's be very consistent and disciplined with a way of life. And what that'll do is that'll actually give you the opportunity to then break the script, because sometimes when we're so disciplined and so rote or routine, that then nothing kind of wakes us up anymore, right? And you want those moments for memories, and you want a moment to create a moment that actually impacts someone. And I think it's really helpful for coaches that is, and I saw coaches do this really well when I was a kid or when I was in high school and college, is so it's kind of like, for the parenting example, right, by the way, is right, like, it would be ridiculous and unhelpful and not a good parent if every single night, your kid just goes to bed whenever they want. They have no bedtime routine. Right. They can do whatever they want, and they eat ice cream before bed every night. That would be ridiculous, and you'd probably be that would probably not help you, and that would be a very chaotic family, right?
Absolutely.
But let's say, okay, like for us, our family is a little bit more on the stringent side with bedtime, where we have a really solid routine. They have to go through their checklist, and then they're in bed by 6:30. Boom, boom, boom. But what that does then is that actually sets the groundwork to then break the script and create really powerful relational connections, where now once a month, we put them down at 6:30, we walk out of the room, and then 15 minutes later, we walk in, we turn the light on, and we say, hey, we're going to get ice cream, right? We want to have a little date. We want to surprise you. We want to what? Boom, whatever. And to them, they'll never forget that moment because you've kind of set the stage in a way where you're breaking the script. You're breaking the way that they think it should go, and you're kind of breaking out of the routine that you've set in a really good way. That kind of just gives them it really, and there's actually data to support this in that book, that you just remember it better. You just literally that is how you make moments for kids. That's how you make moments on teams. And and those are really good to take advantage of for teaching moments, right? So do those moments. And when you need to have a really big conversation with your kid, or do those moments when you need to do something more serious, or just something that needs to be remembered, because when you do that it kind of really gets deep down into our memory,
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it. And plus it teaches your kids to get in the idea as they get older to, routine is good, and having habits that are positive are good, but occasionally veering off them and just kind of going on an adventure is pretty cool. And you've seen the benefits of that with your kids, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's awesome.
They love it.
I love that. Jefferson Bethke is our guest here. Last couple questions with Jeff on the podcast. I wanted to ask you just your view of social media now, I guess, considering that it was a social media post on YouTube that started this journey in a lot of ways to where you are today. Obviously, God had a lot of plans and different things for you to do, but it started with being able to write a book, and all this came from a video on YouTube. How do you view social media? What are some of your thoughts on it, and maybe even some of the disciplines that you have? I know you have a lot of disciplines which are really healthy and good, but what are your thoughts on social media?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. I don't think it's inherently evil, but I also don't think it's inherently good. I think it's a little bit neutral with a little bent towards unhelpful, damaging, and it needs to be regulated, and we need to discipline ourselves. So it's not totally neutral. I'd put it I tip the scales a little bit towards unhelpful, but not in the sense of but it can be helpful, right? So there's both. But I think the default position is here's a better way to put it. There's the most powerful companies we have ever seen in the entire world, from oil to gas to automotive industry to whatever it is. The most powerful ones in history are currently right now, right? Yeah. Tech companies, proportionally to our GDP, proportionally to how they can infiltrate culture and affect 2 billion people. There's no other companies that barely, could affect 2 billion people usually back in the past, or 3 billion people, Yeah. And so their power is insane, and the power is really concentrated, right? Even if you could say that with oil or automotive industries, there was thousands of people in those corporations making those decisions. Realistically, at the top, there's 50 people that are making decisions in Silicon Valley that are affecting 2 billion people. So it's just absurd, right? And and the money is in the trillions. And so they have a mission, and they make more money if we look at their product, right? If we engage with their product, if we consume their product. So they then have a motivation to make it as addictive as possible.
Right.
Now, not even in a bad way, that's a business motivation.
Oh, yeah.
They make more money and they build their business better if they can keep our eyes on the screen. So then my thing is, unless you have a competing vision, unless you have a competing discipline, unless you have a competing rule of life for your own phone and for your household and for your family or for yourself, then you will lose. Right? You will automatically lose the game because their ways are too powerful, right? How they manipulate color, how they manipulate notifications, how they manipulate and think of ways of how your brain works, right? They have spent billions of dollars of studying rats and psychology and all these things and gambling and slot machines to know how they can get you on there more, right? So unless you have a competing vision, you will lose. And so that's more what I'm saying is the default position is most people don't. And so that's where I think it's unhealthy, because most of us are just being sucked in to the robotic psychology of just kind of, drone-like behavior with how we engage with it, rather than saying, oh yeah, it's great and it's helpful, it's in a tool, but do I have a competing vision for what it should look like? And so yeah, our family has what we call the Technology Manifesto, and it's basically just some rules we've carved up of what's helpful for it in our family, how do we want to use it, what does that look like? And so yeah, that tends to be rules like no phones in the bedroom at night. We want that to be a sacred space. We turn our phones off 24 hours once a week. So my phone is completely turned off and my computer is completely turned off Friday night to Saturday night for our family Sabbath every single week. And that's you can't get a hold of me, right? If some emergency happens, well, that stinks. I'm with my family at least, right?
Right.
That's just what we've chosen. And so, yeah, so it's off for 24 hours a week. What else is there? There's a bunch. Like, yeah, no, none at the dinner table. It's not allowed to come out on date nights. Our kids we're pretty minimal on shows and screen time for them. There's a bunch more that I could think of, but and stuff like that. And we also do like a week-long break once a year. So we call it the 1-1-1 rule, where we try to have our phone off or away from us 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and then 1 week a year. And just to think and breathe and have that space for the Lord to speak. And so, so I think social media is great. I think it's an awesome tool. I don't think it's reality, but I also don't think that it should be knocked for not being reality. I think some people say, oh, it's not reality, it's cheap, it's fake. I'm like, no, it's a great tool to share like highlights. Yeah. And I think some people actually struggle with that part too, which I disagree with. That they sometimes think like, oh, all we see is people's good, all we see is highlights. I'm like, well, yeah, that's kind of what it is. Like, you shouldn't be going to it for like an authentic view of everyone's life. That's not right. You should go to your real life for that, right? Yeah. It's like no one goes to a photo book. No one goes to their family photo book back at grandma's house and says, hey, grandma, how come all these pictures are just of the family smiling? How come all these pictures are just of the good birthdays? How come all these pictures are just of our awesome vacations? How come there's no pictures of when I got sick or when I got the flu or, when mom and dad got divorced? How come there's no pictures of that? You don't do that, right? No, like that's not a photo book's job. A photo book's job is just to tell a story and represent the highlights of your family. And I think social media is actually like that. And I think a lot of us knock it too much. There's like this weird countercultural movement of like, be super authentic, be super vulnerable. And it's like, no, that's kind of like a weird fake pseudo vulnerability on the internet. It's like, do that in your real life with your real people, you know?
Yeah, no. And it's interesting. I wonder, that Technology Manifesto that you just described, did you implement that because you saw yourself gravitating to a place that was unhealthy?
Yeah, well, I think it's just like kind of like bowling, in my opinion, with those. What do you call those? What do they put those when the kids bowl those things up in the gutters? What do they call those? Like
oh yeah. The I don't even know what they're called. They're bumpers.
Bumpers.
Yes.
Yeah, bumpers. So like it's kind of like that. It's like, okay, I want to live our life is the bowling ball, right? Like we are the bowling ball going down the trajectory of where we think the Lord's taking us. And I just think, you will do a better job if you put those bumpers up, which is like rules and manifestos of getting yourself in the right direction. If not, then you'll just kind of go off in the gutter, you know?
It makes complete sense. I love that. Jefferson Bethke has been our guest here on the podcast. So I know you've written basically 2 books and co-authored a third with your wife, and you got another one on the way and lots of good things happening. Can you share with our audience just some of the ways and places that you are? I know there's a great event happening in Ohio, I think in the fall, that's a marriage sort of retreat. Can you share a little bit about what's happening with that, with the new book, and just kind of things in the future?
Yeah, so I have a new book coming out in October, which I'm really excited about. I think the subtitle is, I haven't memorized it yet, but it's like Reclaiming Your Life in an Overspent, Overworked, and Overconnected World.
Oh, that's good.
And so I kind of wrote this idea of how do we kind of recapture a fullness and not be just driven to pseudo-false, kind of shallow anxiousness or anxiety and live in a really flourishing existence with Jesus. So I'm really excited for that. That comes in October. But yeah, the main thing that takes up a lot of our time now, and that's kind of our concentration, is family teams. It's an initiative we do with our mentors that has everything from books to courses to a free podcast called 5-Minute Fatherhood. And then we do a really big live event called the Family Teams Weekend in October, where we basically just, we call it, 2 days that can change your family forever. It's not a conference. It's a lot more of a workshop where you kind of come in, you get a family blueprint, you get a mission and vision, you get kind of to change your trajectory of your family and work on your family. And we're really excited for that. That's in October as well in Ohio. But yeah, so all the family team stuff is at familyteams.com. You can see the event, you can see the podcast, you can see the books we've written. But equipping fathers and mothers to build multi-generational family teams on mission is kind of what we're really focusing on right now. And that's definitely where you can find that, familyteams.com.
That's cool. And you can check out everything on his social media pages at Jefferson Bethke. You're posting all about that stuff on Twitter and Instagram, and lots of good stuff happening. I have one last question, actually 2 more last questions, but the one I wanted to just ask really is because you live in Hawaii, you live in Maui, and I always wonder, and I remember when you were moving there and that big move that you made to go from Seattle to Hawaii and what that was like, but now you're entrenched there and you've been there a while. Is it everything that people who live in the Northeast like me in Connecticut just wish that we could have? Is there even a downside to living in Hawaii?
They're really, I mean, besides the expensiveness of real estate.
True.
not so much. But yeah, no, it is pretty exactly what you think. The beaches, the water, the weather, the winter is a cool 80 degrees. It's pretty incredible.
And the summer's a cool 80 degrees too, right?
Yeah, exactly. It like fluctuates by like 10 degrees all year.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. Jeff, this has been great. Thanks so much for being here on the show. The last question that we ask all of our guests on the podcast, and I'm always curious what the answers are for different people, is the Lord. What is God right now teaching you in the season of life that he has you? Because he's always teaching us something, and it's a process in our relationship with him. What is God teaching you where you are today?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think of me and Alyssa tend to kind of seek the Lord every year and pick a word for the year individually. So not the same word, but just kind of like, hey, what, and kind of like, Lord, give us a theme for the year. What do you feel like you want us to work on and grow in and live in? And the word he gave me for this year is diligence. And so I feel like that is what I'm learning. That's what I'm pushing into, of just how to keep my head down, how to be faithful. I think specifically millennials, we sometimes can struggle with just wanting things to happen so fast, so quick. When that's not the scriptures are about faithfulness. The scriptures are about guys who didn't get their shot or have their moment till they're 60, right? Because they lived in obedience to the Lord. Or even if you're Jesus himself, till you're 33, which that's like a senior citizen according to millennials age, right?
Right.
And so, just diligence, just being faithful with my work, doing the work, doing the hard work, but doing it honoring to the Lord and being diligent in it. That's what he's teaching me, and that's what I'm learning.
He is Jefferson Bethke, New York Times bestselling author, speaker, evangelist, husband, dad. Lots of great things happening in Jeff's life, and just appreciate you. Looking forward to your new book and lots of great things happening on the horizon. Jeff, thanks for being here on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Glad we could get it done, and just encouraged by all that you're doing, my friend. Keep fighting that good fight, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It was a blast.
And many thanks to Jefferson Bethke for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Of course, if you aren't already following him, please do give him a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Jefferson Bethke. You can check out his website, jeffandalyssa.com. He's got such great content, lots of good stuff, not only on his social platforms, but on his YouTube channel, still putting videos out there as well, and tons of videos from the past that are up there on so many different topics that related to the faith world and just parenting and life itself. And that 2013 book, Jesus Greater Than Religion, was a game changer. I highly recommend you read it if you haven't checked it out already. Even though it's 5-6 years old, it's still a very relevant book because it points people back to Jesus, not to church or religion or even Christianity. It's just pointing you back to Jesus. And that's really what we like to do on this podcast, is bring Jesus back into the conversation. So give Jeff a follow. Check out all the stuff he's got going on. Looking forward to his new book as well, releasing October 2019. Thanks to Jeff for joining us here on the podcast. And we want to thank our sponsors, Compassion International, as well. We're grateful to them and thankful that they are partners with us here at Sports Spectrum because we believe in what their mission is all about. And their mission is to bring the name of Jesus to every single child and releasing them from poverty. We sponsor a 13-year-old boy from Haiti, and it's the best $38 that we, the Romanos, spend every single month. And you can get in on it as well by sponsoring a child through Compassion. Go to the website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum. You'll see a list of children there. Pray about it. Consider sponsoring a child. Choose the child that you want to sponsor. Food, education, medical care, vocational training. That's what happens when you sponsor a child through Compassion. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum and consider releasing a child from poverty today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode with Jefferson Bethke. If this is your first time hearing Sports Spectrum, welcome. We're so glad to have you. Click that subscribe button. That would be awesome. If you could check out whatever app you're on listening to this podcast right now, click that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. 300 plus interviews we've done here on the intersection of sports and faith. Lots of great interviews and different type of people, men, women, sports, pastors, writers, authors, people like Jefferson Bethke, former college baseball players turned New York Times bestselling authors and evangelists. Just so many great interviews that you can take a listen to. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Also want to direct you to our website, sportsspectrum.com. Content every single day on the intersection of sports and faith, including a daily devotional, and every single podcast that we have released is available at our website. Check it out, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time with a new episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. We love you guys. Have a great rest of your day.